The death of Chinese Premier Zhou Enlai, on January 8, 1976, triggered the incident. For almost a decade before his death, Zhou was involved in a political power struggle against other senior leaders in the Politburo of the Chinese Communist Party, with Zhou's most visible and powerful opponents being the group named the Gang of Four. The leader of the group, Jiang Qing, was the wife of their party chairman, Mao Zedong. To mute the expected popular outpouring of grief at Zhou's death, the Chinese Communist Party limited the period of public mourning. On April 4, 1976, on the eve of China's annual Qingming Festival, where the Chinese people traditionally pay respects to their deceased family members, thousands gathered around the monument to the people's heroes in Tiananmen Square to commemorate the life and death of Zhou Enlai by laying wreaths, banners, poems, placards, and flowers at the foot of the monument. The most obvious purpose of this memorial was to eulogize Zhou, but Jiang Qing, Zhang Chunjiao, and Yao Wenyuan were also criticized for their actions against the premier. A small number of slogans left at Tiananmen even attacked Mao himself, and his cultural revolution. Up to 2 million people may have visited Tiananmen Square on April 4. First-hand observations of the events in Tiananmen Square on April 4 report that all levels of society, from the peasants to high-ranking People's Liberation Army officers and the children of high-ranking cadres, attended mourning events. Those who participated were motivated by a mixture of anger over their treatment of Zhou, criticism of Mao and his policies, apprehension for China's future, and defiance of those who intend to punish the public for commemorating Zhou's memory. There is nothing to suggest that events were coordinated from any position of leadership. It was a spontaneous demonstration reflecting widespread public sentiment. Deng Xiaoping was noticeably absent, and he instructed his children to avoid being seen at the square. On the night of April 4, 1976, the Central Committee of the Chinese Communist Party held a meeting to discuss the situation in Tiananmen Square. Party elders such as Hua Guofeng and Wu De, who weren't allied with the Gang of Four, expressed criticism of the protesters and some of their slogans which were critical of the Gang of Four and party leadership. Meanwhile, the Gang of Four were startled by the personal attacks at the event, and began to use their controlled newspapers to accuse Deng Xiaoping of encouraging and controlling the protesters. They consulted with the very ill Mao Zedong, claiming these people are capitalist roaders, who were hitting back at the proletarian revolution. Government action began on the morning of April 5, when the People's Liberation Army began removing articles of mourning from Tiananmen Square. Later the same morning, crowds gathering around the memorial arrived to discover that it had been completely removed by the police. Attempts to suppress the mourners led to a violent riot, where police cars were set on fire and a crowd of over 100,000 people forced its way into several government buildings around the square. In response, the Central Committee of the Chinese Communist Party made the decision to forcefully clear the crowds in Tiananmen Square. Security forces under the People's Liberation Army's Beijing detachment, alongside militia under the control of the Gang of Four, went into the square to forcibly clear the area. Around 40 arrests occurred with no deaths or injuries, and by the morning of April 6, all articles of mourning had been removed. By 6 p.m., most of the crowd had dispersed, but a small group remained until 10 p.m., when a security force entered the square and arrested them. Many of those arrested were later sentenced in a people's trial at Peking University, or were sentenced to prison work camps. Incidents similar to those which occurred in Beijing on April 4 and 5 also occurred in Zhengzhou, Kunming, Taiyuan, Changchun, Shanghai, Wuhan, and Guangzhou. Possibly because of his close association with Zhou Enlai, Deng Xiaoping was formally stripped of all positions inside and outside the party on April 7. After Mao's death on September 9, 1976, Hua Guofeng and Wang Dongxing played an important role in arresting the Gang of Four in late October 1976. They subsequently expressed their opinion that the Tiananmen Incident was not a counter-revolutionary activity. Along with other party elders, they rehabilitated Deng and brought him back to Beijing. Deng and his reformist allies subsequently became involved in a power struggle against Huan Wang, who were more traditionally minded Maoists. Deng eventually emerged as China's paramount leader in December 1978, pushing Hua Guofeng aside. Many of the 1976 demonstrators had written poems in memory of Zhou Enlai and as an expression of political opposition to the political situation in China. Poetry created during the incident was later published in 4 unofficial editions by students from Beijing's No. 2 Foreign Language Institute, a school with close ties to Deng Xiaoping. In December 1978, at the third plenum of the CCP 11th Central Committee, the Chinese Communist Party reassessed its position on the Tiananmen Incident of 1976 and declared it a revolutionary event, a complete reversal of the previous position put forward by the PA.